So I have the honorable position of standing between you and lunch today. And we're running a little behind, so we'll see how this goes. Well, we'll see if they agree with that. So as he said, I am a member of the cargo team. I've been a member of the cargo team now for like 3 or 4 years or so. I also maintain a lot of different crates, things like Clap, Winnow, more that you're probably using or will be using soon. And something that I've observed within the community is that there is a fear of RFCs. There's a lot of actually good reasons behind that. There's been a lot of frustrations that have built up around the community over time. Like way back before I was involved in Rust, there was a huge debacle before 1.0 about what to name usize. And that caused, just naming of usize caused a lot of consternation, a lot of problems. I think Florian is here. He was probably around for that, I'm assuming. Um, but that led to new rules and changes to how RFCs behave so we could be able to improve things from there. Then this happened again in a different way in 2018 with the changes they were making for the 2018 edition around the module system. There was a lot of people cared about what was happening. A lot of people had ideas, and working through all those ideas just exhausted everyone. Unfortunately, not everything was. There have been some lessons learned from that process. Some things have changed, but there's still a lot of people who have the viewpoint from back then of like, oh man, RFCs, like there's so much to them. This is a very rough thing for me to participate in. And also for myself in coming into this and just being like, I'm going to go write an RFC. Let's see how that goes. There's just a lot of these problems that you can run into. And I figured it'd be helpful for me to be able to share some of the perspectives I've gained through my experience. I mean, at this point, I have written a decent number of RFCs. Also, as part of being on the cargo team, I review a lot of RFCs. I don't know how many of these cargo RFCs I reviewed, but that's about 100 RFCs assigned to the cargo team. So there's two people I want to talk to in this group. One is I have an idea. I want to go and change something in the community, and I have the time to kill to be able to actually do so. Unfortunately, you actually need to have time to be able to do these things. Another audience for this is, hey, something's going on and I have an idea I want to be able to share. There's a change that I think there's something that needs to be considered as part of this. I'm going to first talk to the people who want to write an RFC, but I think that's going to help provide context then to be talking to the people who want to be able to provide input into an RFC. So I have an idea. Now, what do I do with it? Well, the automatic reaction is, all right, I'm going to go write an RFC, done. That doesn't always go over well because there's different things involved that can be able to help with that. And also the Rust community has been experimenting, as I said, after the 2018 debacle over RFCs, they've been experimenting on a per team basis for how to be able to make decisions. Not everything needs to be an RFC, but the problem is there's these other things. There's MCPs, and the question is like, well, what even is an MCP? Where do I even go for it? I know that for myself, in preparing for this and in preparing for talking about how to improve RFCs at the all hands, I actually had a hard time finding the documentation for MCPs. Actually, several of the links I tried on the Rust dev guide were actually broken. So this is a bit of a black hole to even try to get into even knowing how to do an MCP. So what even is an MCP? Well, I'm going to use the term during this presentation to broadly refer to any kind of major change, more informal major change proposal. More specifically, the compiler team uses the term MCP for part of their decision-making process. For libs API, they have another process that's somewhat similar to it that's called an ACP, API change proposal. And then for the cargo team, we've not even formalized this much, and it's just go create an issue, we'll put a vote on it, move it forward, great. So what is it that sets apart an MCP from an RFC, and how do I know which one I should be using? Well, they're both mostly, maybe a compiler team person like Ergo will have some comments about this, but they're mostly about what we refer to as one-way doors. The term one-way and two-way doors referring to can you be able to undo a decision that you've made? Versus that's a two-way door. Versus a one-way door, you can only go through the door, you can't go back. And I say mostly because there's two-way doors. Like I could go introduce something into the language, but then I can have an addition go and remove the thing from the language. There's still going to be the code that has to live around forever, but at least it's not affecting new users. Or there might be something like, even something like a refactor. You might think of that as, oh, if I change a variable name in a function, that's very easily a two-way door. I can very easily the next day change the name of that the variable in that function. But if I change a major type that touches everything within the Rust C code base, and then I want to undo that change 6 months later after everyone's been building code off that, that's not a simple revert. That's not a simple go and change things. That requires a bit more work to it. So the line between a one-way door and a two-way door is a bit fuzzy. And there's also the fact that there's community impact for these. Even if you go and write a very isolated, unstable feature, that's something that's going to be in front of people and they're going to be experimenting and relying on things like that, the compiler team wants to be able to be like, yeah, we want to be able to move forward with that experiment. So I'm kind of a bit hand wavy here about MCPs being one-way doors. They can kind of be a little bit of both depending on the situation. But that's just the main parts of it, but there's still a lot more to this. That MCPs tend to be focused more on things that are niche or internal, like a refactoring or a big refactor, not the tiny ones, or even like running of experiments. Well, RFCs tend to be things that we want to be able to get feedback from everywhere in the community. And that's one of the things that I use as a gauge for this is this something that I just need to get a couple of people's opinion on? Or is this something where I want to make sure I've heard from the Slint people, the Rust for Linux people, Tokyo, some random person who maintains a crate that I've never even heard of before, but I find out through this process? Like, how wide is it that I want to be able to get this feedback? Also, MCPs tend to be a little less formal. Like, there is, for most teams, a form to fill out, but there's a lot less investigation, research, and discussion that goes into it. Well, with RFCs, you're very thoroughly documenting a whole lot of things and trying to make sure you're covering every single case because this is going to be eventually stable and we're wanting to make sure that people have all the information in when they're making their decision. MCPs also tend to be very easy to sign off. There's a team responsible. You just need to get somebody, usually you just need to get somebody to say, yes, we should move forward with this, and then somebody to say, I agree, and you're done. RFCs, it's everyone involved in the conversation from their respective teams, -2, need to sign off on it. And then if anyone within those can also put in a concern and block it. So there's a lot bigger of a barrier to getting sign off on that. All right, so how do you know which one to use? Well, you probably could just ask the respective team to help you with it, but there's something we're skipping with that, which is that you need to socialize this change. Before you need to make sure people are even aware of this, get input on like how important is this? Are the other people interested in this? One approach to that is just searching for issues, seeing what kinds of issues exist for this before, or searching on internals. Internals is our forum for having discussions about the development of Rust itself. And in doing that search, you might find that there's already somebody working on this idea. Great, you're now part of the audience for my last part of my presentation. Or you might find that there was discussion on this topic and it stalled out and died off. One of the most important contributions you can make to the Rust community is to dig into all those threads, figure out all the information that went into them. What are the concerns that people had? What kind of feedback did they get from the project about these ideas? What all considerations need to be put into a design, and summarize it. One of the hardest things it is like, as a member of the cargo team, there's tons and tons of proposals that we have to look through. Like I showed, we have like, I don't know, was it 12 RFCs open right now for the cargo team? We have 1,500 issues. For you, it might be the most important issue. For us, it's one of 1,500. And so it's something that we're not going to be able to spend. And for me to go and spend an hour or 2 hours reading through the background just to then have 1 or 2 hours of back and forth with you on it, that's a lot. And if you could be able to take off, front load a lot of that work for me so I can be able to just be like, oh, here's the summary. Let me go down it. Oh, awesome. That caught me up on everything. Yes, I can be able to quickly answer your question. That's a big help. And so summarizing, like there's one issue in the cargo repo that's like the top most upvoted issue, even though I only know that because somebody pointed out. I don't usually look at emojis. And it like a lot of it was a back and forth between the cargo team and people being like, oh, this is the most important thing. Why has no one done anything about this? The cargo team's like, we've already answered that question. Like there's concerns, there's problems, it needs further investigation. And I suggested at one point, just another person came on like, oh, this is so important. Why isn't this done? I was like, well, could you go back and summarize everything that's happened before and be able to present on that? And I was just like, they're probably not going to do it. It's just going to die off, whatever. This is going to happen again and again. The person actually did it, and it was amazing. They went from being like, why isn't this being done to, oh, that's why this isn't being done. Well, wait, maybe we could do these workarounds and help with that. And it just it made the a very negative conversation very positive and made things a whole lot better. And it's really turned around that thread. And so summarizing is a very important thing to be able to happen. Now, once you've summarized it, or if there's no discussion at all, if there's no discussion at all, then you might go ahead and post, give a vibe check. See, are other people interested in this idea? What kind of feedback do I get? What things have I not considered? Are there related use cases? And maybe eventually you'll formalize that into writing up a pre-RFC. This is more, again, a pre-step to an RFC just to be able to help get that smaller group feedback instead of going to the front of the entire community saying, I have this idea. It's like, here's a smaller group, getting some feedback from people who've been through this process before to be able to help identify holes for you to be able to help fill in. All right, so now that you've done all this and you've written up RFC, or even if during your pre-RFC process, there might be a lot of feedback. Just a load more button of 300. I think this was not even that one of those controversial RFCs that I mentioned before. Actually, I think this is one of my RFCs I pulled this from. Ugh. So through all this feedback, you can get pulled in many different directions. There can be people saying a use case of, I need to go this way, or I need to go that way. Well, in writing about those 2018 RFCs, a member of the Rust project at the time, Aaron, emphasized some values of the community that can be able to help you in trying to balance these different needs. One is that we value pluralism, that we're not just a community focused on writing web servers. We're not just a community focused on embedded, like was just talked about before, or web GUI development, which we also just heard about. We're a community targeting all of these things. We're targeting the C++ people, the JavaScript people, backend, frontend, server, whatever it is, we're trying to support all of them. And in doing so, we want to be positive sum thinking. We don't want to think in terms of it's this person or this person that we need to be able to write a solution for, but how can we fit the needs of both? And how can we be able to, and in doing so, we're not sacrificing for one or the other. And something important about this is that we also don't want to take the solution of like compromise where it's like, well, we'll just take these two extreme solutions and just take the average of them. We also don't want to take this the approach of, let's see, sacrificing one for the other, yeah. Or just say, we're going to go ahead and do both solutions. Like we'll just provide 2, 5, 10 different ways of doing something just because there's these different users. We want to try and still have a unified goal and vision, which means that there is going to be times that we will have to make things a little bit better for one or the other, but we still want to take input from all. I believe that RFC was the MSRV aware RFC. I don't know how many people are familiar with what even that term means, but when I wrote that RFC, and when I took in that feedback from all those different people, there's people who we still wouldn't give them the exact solution they wanted, but by listening to their feedback, digging into their concerns and better understanding them, the RFC became much better. We got better features. We were better able to explain the problem to people. We were better able to define how these things should work because of all that feedback. And so being able to listen to everyone and try and find how we can be able to fit their needs in, even if they don't get the exact solution they want, we can still be able to benefit them. So there's still all these different people to be able to navigate between. And an important part of this also is to know your audience. I talked a little bit before about the decision-making process for an RFC that you're going to get that sign-off from the team. So you as the author are a valuable source of input to this process. You've done a lot of the legwork on investigating this. The community is also valuable for us to get the input from, but the final decision makers are the team are the relevant teams for the RFC. They're the ones that have to sign off. So if that's something important to keep in mind is like, oh, if I'm getting feedback from the team versus if I'm getting feedback from this other person, like that the person from the team can be able to scuttle this whole thing and make it so I can't actually go anywhere with this. So I might want to listen to the team. And even though like it doesn't mean that the community feedback is not important, the team will actually be like, hey, you haven't taken this input into account. Like, please do so. Like if you just kind of ignore people. But there is the fact that they're the final decision makers. So if they don't agree with this, then that's going to prevent this from moving forward. So how do you know who the team is? Well, each of the RFCs gets tagged with the relevant team. So you can look at the labels on your RFC and be able like, okay, that's who it is. But how do you translate that? Well, on the Rust language website, there's a governance page that will list all of the teams and who their members are. And this goes on further, but it's not just 2 members for the cargo team. And I'm not even on there, so that shows that. But so you can then be able to be like, oh, okay, these are the people. It'd be nice if the RFC process actually made that clear through it of like, hey, here's decision makers, even though they might not always be speaking in a decision-making role, and even they can disagree through the process. Now, sometimes you might have this, where you have 2 teams making a decision. One is you have a lot of decision makers that have to get all of their opinions aligned with each other. 2, these are 2 autonomous groups. It's easy for a team to be able to come to a consensus when they can be able to regularly meet together, talk it through, and be able to be done. But this is 2 autonomous groups who meet separately, talk among themselves, and then throw their opinions over the wall at each other. And you have to try and somehow negotiate all of this. One thing that you can be able to do for this is see if you can be able to scope down your RFC to just the minimum amount needed to be able to move this forward that only involves one team. Then you can be able to have a small addition for the other team. We did that recently with an RFC that's still under discussion called supported targets, where it's like, oh, it was going to involve the Crates.io team, but hey, we could actually move this to a future possibility and make it just involve the cargo team. That'll make the discussion much easier to have. Another thing that can happen, though, is that you can't actually do that. But instead, what you might do is actually create this as 2 separate RFCs. I'm working on a feature called cargo script, which allows you to put your cargo.toml file actually directly in your Rust source code. And so actually split the RFC up for the language team to have an RFC just for that syntax, and the cargo team to then have an RFC for how that syntax is going to be used. And by splitting it up in that way, I made it so that the decisions can be very narrow, the discussion and the decisions to be very narrowly focused, so we don't end up distracting each other or losing context or any of that kind of stuff. So talking about splitting up RFCs, they're kind of like regular PRs, where if you have too many controversial things in a PR, too much to be able to discuss, usually the reviewer will hone in on one thing and one thing only, discuss that, and once that's done, they'll then notice the next problem and start honing in on that and discussing that. And so that can make it drag on and take forever. Something that will then sometimes happen is, with an RFC, is there might be something that never fully gets resolved, but the RFC still gets approved. And there can be some things that then linger on past the RFC that just never got noticed. That happened, if I'm remembering so if somebody wants to correct my history, but when that 2018 modules RFC was done, there was one part to it that there was so much to discuss that it kind of got ignored. And they actually then had to go back and they realized a couple years later, like, oh, that was actually a bad idea. We shouldn't do that. And they had to go and like unapprove that one part of the RFC because it got lost among all of the other discussions. So instead, if they were able to break up and better focus the RFCs, that would have gotten the attention it deserved and could have had a better discussion for it. So, kind of hinted at this already, but so when you have an RFC, you need to make sure that you have all of your unresolved questions resolved, and that once the RFC is approved, it's final. No. As I said, we just unapproved something in an RFC, and really what sometimes you need is some experimentation. There might be something, you want to make sure that all of the big things that you want community input are taken care of, but there might be like, oh, bike shedding the name of this one thing. Well, let's see how the feature works, try it out in practice, and maybe we can be able to come up with a better name. And you might find that you need to be able to change course on things. So for example, like when we were working on workspace inheritance, that was where you can be able to have your where you have a workspace of packages, and you want to define your, say, your edition field in one place instead of everywhere within your workspace. Well, this was written by Alex Crichton, who is a person who's done a lot in the Rust community. He's done amazing work, all that kind of stuff. I was mentoring this as a new cargo team member, and this is somebody's first contribution. And for us to be like, oh wait, this doesn't from the RFC doesn't seem like it's correct. For us to be like, we don't agree with Alex and the entire cargo team previously having made a decision. This feels uncomfortable, but we went ahead and like, okay, let's actually move forward with this. And so what we did is we went ahead and said, no, we're not going to move forward with that decision. Put in notes in the tracking issue for it as we move forward, and presented this during stabilization, being like, hey, we didn't actually do what the RFC said in these certain ways, but this is okay because these are why it's important, and this is why we can be able to make this decision. Now, that works for when things are like MCP level, where they're more niche or internal. When things, there might be times when that happens when you need to get wider input on this. There's one time I actually had to go and write an RFC to replace another RFC because there was just people put in so many different wild ideas into RFC of what we could potentially do. And it turned out that those were all blocking the work from actually being able to move forward because they just put in too many wild, star-eyed ideas. It's like, no, let's we want to scale this back, but we've scaled it back so much at this point, we need to make sure we go back to the community and make sure that we've not missed something that's going to happen because we're removing all these features that were previously approved. So now I'm going to shift over to, hey, I'm not going to go out and write an RFC, but I saw an RFC that I care about that topic, and I have an idea of what it should be done. Like I have some pet peeves about cargo, or I care about language design or things like that. So how do I know about the RFC in the first place? I mentioned before about searching, like that might be something to do, but that's like a one-time operation. Well, there's some great resources like This Week in Rust where they regularly let you know about RFCs. You don't have to like subscribe to the RFC repo. Instead, this is whenever an RFC changes state, whenever it moves, whenever it's proposed, or whatever it's like, okay, it's now in its 10-day waiting period after the team has approved it before it closes out. So this is a time to make sure this is going to be it. If you don't get your feedback in now, then yeah. So you have that 10-day period to be able to get that feedback in. And so following This Week in Rust, seeing what happens there, that gives you a summary overview for major state changes that happen with RFCs. But even when you're participating in RFC, you run into the problem of, oh, there's a lot of feedback. Where do I find, has my thought already been shared? Like, how do I even get this in here? So one tip I have is don't post in the main thread. Always post on the most relevant part of the RFC itself. This helps because the main thread is just hard to follow when you have so many people like having there might be a conversation happening and somebody else shares a completely unrelated thought, and it's hard to be able to follow. It's nice to be able to keep these things separate. But also, like, maybe when you go and post it, you'll see that somebody posted something similar in the exact same spot. And you're like, oh, okay, that helped me find that conversation. Hopefully the RFC author can also be able to help shepherd people on. That's something I sometimes do, is copy and paste somebody's post into a section of the RFC and mark their other one as resolved. And so that way to help, and also to help consolidate threads, be like, hey, this thread is also happening here. Let's kind of move things over. And something else that's important from the RFC author side is to summarize these comments and then to help post it back to you as the author, so you can actually be like, oh, this is where you summarized my input and took into the RFC. Let me go and review that and see, does that actually make sense? Is that what I was intending to say, or did you actually view it as important as I felt it was? So now at this point, with how to jump in, there's just some basic principles that we need to keep in mind. One is just the idea of humility. There's a lot of experts in the room. There are some things that two competent people can be able to come to different decisions on, and that's okay. We need to be able to understand that and respect that and be able to move on. We also need to have empathy. We need to be able to, both as the RFC author and as somebody providing feedback, to understand that, like, say as the person providing feedback, that there might be other use cases I'm not considering. There might be ways of generalizing the problem to be able to help in multiple people instead of hyper-focusing on, I have this one problem and this one solution. Let's try and focus instead on the problem and understand that there's other problems in here as well. And we also need to be able to make sure that we're introspecting, that we understand where it is that we're coming from, why we have this idea, and be able to better dig into that, to be able to be focusing on that rather than on the surface level concerns. And I hope that from this you'll be feel a lot more comfortable participating in RFCs, and that they will seem a little bit less scary. Thank you.